Hello, my name is Matthew, and I just read Lost at Sea by Guy de Maupassant. This is translated by Sandra Smith, and it has a note. The literal translation of the title is The Drowned Man. And this is a sad story. It was uncomfortable and at times really ridiculous. The first person we meet is this sailor who is a monster of a man. He's violent, ill-tempered, he's a drinker, and he gets himself into a marriage with a woman that he hates. She's a barmaid, and he would, after his day's work, after his catch, he would go into this bar and drink. And the more he drank, the more attractive this barmaid became. And eventually they get married, and he hates her. And it's known all through town that he's violent. He beats her. He screams and hurls insults at her. And there's nothing she can do, apparently, and the whole town knows and pities her. And they're upset with the sailor. And it's so well known that the sailor, when he's on his boat, he would get himself so worked up and angry at his wife that he would beat the fish and beat the lobsters in front of the other sailors. When they would come back to shore towards the docks, apparently all the fishwives would line up, waiting for their husband's return. And our sailor couldn't even wait to start hurling insults at his wife. And he would do this before he had docked, over the water in front of the whole town. And I read a passage. The words flew out of his mouth, sometimes short and horrible, like cannonballs, sometimes like thunder that lasted for 5 minutes, such a hurricane of curses that his lungs seemed to hold all the fieriness of the God of the Old Testament. So that's pretty a tall order. This man is completely out of his mind with anger, and he's taking it all out on his poor wife that we sympathize with. This goes on for years, this horrible, violent marriage. Finally, one night, there's a gigantic storm that wakes up the poor wife in the middle of the night. Her husband is out at sea, and the next morning there's reports that ships have gone down, sailors have died. Her husband is one of them. He never returned. Only a portion of his boat was recovered. And again, time goes by. It's always in the back of her mind, right over her shoulder, what if he returns? And it terrifies her. Even now that he's gone, he's still haunting her. And finally, she's beginning to accept that this horrible part of her life, this terrible, awful man, is finally dead and gone and can't hurt her anymore. And she's having a walk, this widow is having a walk with a friend of hers, and they come across an auction, a yard sale. And there's an old sailor auctioning off a parrot. And her friend encourages her. Why don't you buy the parrot? It'll be a nice companion. You can have a pet and a little friend to have when you're home alone. And the widow agrees and buys the parrot and takes this new bird pet home with her. And the first thing the parrot does is bite her finger with its beak as soon as she puts seed out for him. And she goes, "You horrible little creature." And that night she goes to bed. The next morning, she hears her husband screaming and hurling insults. And at this point, you might be thinking, you know where the story is going. And I'm sure you're right. She becomes absolutely out of her mind, terrified and paranoid that he has returned, the husband has returned, and she would holler out and would not get responses. And then these insults would come hurling back at her, and she's running around the house looking for her husband, getting more and more upset and already pleading and begging and saying, "Oh, I can bargain with you. I'm sorry." Things like that. Just really low points and emotionally heart-wrecking. She discovers that her husband has not returned. It's the parrot, this old sailor's parrot, who had learned all of these terrible insults from all the sailors that use this kind of violent, powerful language. And she realizes this. "It's you," she says to the parrot. She lunges at the parrot, yanks it to the ground, and with her bare hands rips the parrot to pieces until it's a dead thing. She wraps it up, goes out of her house to discard it, and what's it say? Then she went home, fell onto her knees in front of the empty cage, and sobbing, distraught at what she had done, begged God for forgiveness, as if she had committed some terrible crime. I don't know what I think about this. I did not expect that ending. As I was reading it, I thought, okay, this isn't really Maupassant's best twist. But there's something just dark and deeply disturbing about the there's a psychological insight about what it means to have that kind of post-traumatic stress, and how recurring memories and evocations can bring out maybe not the worst in you, but a really deep part of you. So yeah, Lost at Sea by Guy de Maupassant. Very strange short story. Let me know if you've read it, and leave a comment if you would like, and thank you for watching. Take care.